So I've done a video about tips for easing into the role of a GM, DM, storyteller, master of ceremonies, whatever you want to call them. But don't think I forgot about you players, because it's not exactly easy being a player at a table either. So here are a few tips that I've learned the hard way to better ease yourself into a table. And with these tips, you should generally be able to find yourself comfortable at any table that you sit at. So, that being said, let's get into it. Tip one is to know what you should be concerned about when stepping into a new table and what not to be concerned about. I know that sounds a little bit roundabout, but trust me, coming to a table being frantic and nervous and anxious is something that you kind of want to avoid, and the best way to avoid that is to know what to put your mental energy towards and what to kind of let pass. And there are some things that I guarantee that you're fretting about that you probably shouldn't. So, I should give you a couple of examples, right? Okay. You don't need to memorize the player's handbook. You don't need to memorize all the rules. Coming in with a vague familiarity with how the game works is generally more than enough. If you've watched my being welcoming table, you know what? Fuck it, I'm leaving that in. If you watch my how to create a welcoming table, you should see in it that one of the things that a welcoming table does is that it sets the standard that we're all going to learn this together. And so a lot of times people get frazzled when it's like it is their turn to do something and they don't have spells memorized, or they don't have every aspect of the game memorized. Hey, chill out. Don't worry about it. It's gonna be okay. You're still gonna have fun as long as you're telling the story and you're following the rest of these tips. You'll learn the rules as you go. Experience, to me, is a far better teacher than just sitting around and forcing yourself to cram all this information about a game into your head. We play this stuff to have fun, and some people have fun just sitting and memorizing a book, and other people don't, and that's okay. This hobby is built to accommodate both people, and if there's anybody that ever tells you that that's not the case, that's somebody you probably shouldn't be playing with, because they're not being very welcoming. So, relax about not knowing the rules. You're gonna be okay, alright? I promise. The next thing that I've noticed that people worry about when they come to the table is voice acting. Critical Role has set a very high standard, and it is a lot of people's gateway into TTRPG, and I need you to understand that you don't have to be a professional voice actor to play these games. You don't have to be able to do an accent off the top. But if you do want to do an accent and you're just not comfortable with it, what I'll tell you is this. What do people in Favor Room sound like? What do the people in the Shadowfell sound like? There is no right answer. That's the secret. That's the gag of this whole thing. If you do a shitty Irish accent, throw a little flair in it, make it your own, embrace it, lean into it, and it is the accent of wherever your character is from. This whole thing, this whole TTRPG phenomena, this whole hobby is about being able to be someone else. And if you've got the inclination to do an accent, but not the ability or like the talent, so what? As long as you're having fun, as long as you're not hurting anybody, as long as you're telling a story, and as long as you're being socially conscious of the people at your table, then it's alright. Have fun. And what I mean by the socially conscious is like, let's not do AAVE. Let's not do any stereotypical nonsense. But if you just have a bad, shitty, like, English accent, find ways to make it unique, find ways to make it yours, and find ways to differentiate what you're aiming for. And then you have something all your own. Just have fun and be respectful. You're gonna notice a common theme because honestly, all these tips are just fancy ways of saying have fun and be responsible. But we're gonna go through it anyway because Daddy needs to make his content. Last and certainly not least, about not worrying about everything when you come to the table. And I can only speak to part of the advice that I'm giving, but I would still, if I were talking to a dear friend, a professional would probably have their phone turned off right now. Leaving that in. We're leaving it all in. Screw it. I can only speak to part of the advice that I'm going to give you, but if I were talking to a dear friend, I would give them this advice as well. So, take it at your leisure. If you are worried about being the only blank at the table, for example, I have had numerous times where I was worried about being the only black person at a table. I've newly discovered myself as a non-gender conforming individual. So that's a new fear I get to have when I sit at a table. But if you do have a worry about being the only person at a table, you might want to look into that instinct. If there's something telling you that you being the only blank at the table might become an issue, if you can't talk to the people at your table about that concern, that may not be the table for you. Which leads us into tip number 2. Tip number 2 kind of sucks. Not gonna lie to you, but I have been in this hobby for a while, and it's something that you need to be told, which is not every table's for you. Not every table is going to be good for you, and bad tables can be detrimental to you, and it's better to bite that bullet early than trying to make it work. There is a magic that happens when you find the right people to play with. There is a magic that happens when you're at a table where you trust everyone. When you trust everyone at the table, it's transformative. You can learn new things about yourself. You can build up parts of yourself that you didn't even know were there. It can truly be a magical experience. And that's why I do these videos. That's why I chase doing TTRPG as a career, doing the TTRPG, whatever. It's because of that magic. It's addicting, honestly. When you click with people in a way that you didn't think that you would or could, because you're willing to be vulnerable with them and they're willing to be vulnerable with you, that is the pinnacle of what this entire hobby is about. Now, on the flip, if you play with a table that is malicious, if you play at a table where people don't understand or respect boundaries, if you play with at a table that seeks to genuinely belittle you or your thoughts or your ideas, it's harmful. It's actually harmful. And I have been in games where I should have left day 1 and I didn't leave in year 3. And that is something that I want you to avoid. Because it can make you bitter. It can make you bitter towards people. It can make you bitter towards the hobby. And this hobby is better than that. I promise you there's magic here. And if you haven't felt it, you need to really look around and see what's going on. It's unfortunate that I have to give you that advice, but it's advice that I wish somebody gave me early on. Now, I'm not going to leave you hanging, baby birds, because I know that some of us don't like conflict. So what do you do if you discover that you've sat at a table that you do not belong in? Well, you leave. Now, I know there's part of you that's just like, but I've already spent so much time at this table. We've already told the story. You leave. But I've already invested in the story and the GM put in a lot of work. You leave. You leave. You owe no one anything. And if a GM or if a group of players make it seem as though you owe them something, that's even more confirmation that that's not the table you belong in. You have to look out for yourself. You have to take care of yourself. And I mean this, and I'm getting kind of passionate about this because this is very important. I have heard too many stories about too many people that I know are amazing people to the core who have stayed in a toxic environment where people for fun would tear them down. Leave. It's that simple. You take your stuff, you put it in your bag, and you tell them, thank you very much for inviting me to the table. I am done now. And you go and you find something better because you deserve something better, and it's out there. It might take a little bit of work to find it, but I promise you, a better game is out there. Don't stand for nonsense. Don't stand for being treated any less than how you deserve. And you deserve to be treated with respect. You deserve to be treated like a colleague and not a burden at the table. If you ever feel like a burden, you have to leave. You have to leave. Okay? I'm gonna check in on you, baby bird. Like, you send me a DM if somebody's treating you disrespectfully at a table, okay? Because that's not okay. In fact, we're really gonna go deep into tip 2 here, because I need you to see what toxicity can look like, okay? If someone in your party's entire personality is negging your character and your character's ideas, that's a problem. And if you feel a type of way about it and you've said something and it continues, that's a problem. If you are often ignored or talked over, that's a problem. If you aren't allowed to contribute, that is a problem. If your ideas aren't taken seriously, that is a problem. If somebody is trying to quarterback every move your character makes when it's your turn to make a decision, that is a problem. That is a problem. You should have full autonomy over your character, your decisions, and yourself. And if at any point that is taken away from you, that is a problem. And you need to leave. You need to leave because you deserve better. And this hobby is better than that. And it has more to offer. And if at any time you feel like somebody thinks they're the main character of a campaign, and you are just the sidekick, that is a problem. Now, depending on the severity of these different examples, you may be able to resolve them with just a conversation with everybody at the table, just being upfront and honest about how they feel. If the behavior continues, however, it's probably not going to get better, and you should leave. Okay? Leave. Leave. Now that we got that tip out of the way, it's very important to get that tip out of the way before I give you this next tip, which is that it pays to be vulnerable. It pays to be honest and to let your characters express themselves honestly. Now, this is a tip that's honestly geared towards more roleplay focus games. If you're doing like a munchkin, kick down the door, beat up all the monsters, then nobody's really going to care if you're being vulnerable or not. But generally, I lean on the side roleplay. And with roleplay, I feel as though a lot of people make the mistake of trying to force emotions, trying to force jokes. Because that's how, like, there's no, I guess this tip is basically saying there's nothing wrong with quiet moments. There's nothing wrong with your character not knowing something. There's nothing wrong with weakness. There's nothing wrong with vulnerability. And expressing that adds to the depth of what you're doing. And a lot of times that inspires the table to open up as well. The magic in these games, to me, are the quiet moments, the honest moments, the moments where you're not forcing things to happen. And if you look for those moments, you won't see them. But if you just play your character and honestly do what my character would do, but not in the toxic way where you're using that as a battering ram. It's what my character should do. It's what my character would do, honestly, should be a bridge. And if you're using it as a battering ram, then you don't understand what that sentence actually means. Just to expand on that last point a little bit to make it clear, what I mean by it's what my character would do actually being true and not being weaponized is that you know who you're playing. You know their secrets, you know their desires, you know their motivations, and you know how they're feeling. And there's nothing wrong with expressing that. But the thing is, you need to realize that, and the reason that I say that it's what my character would do should be a bridge, is that if your character does something based on their backstory without explaining it, that's weaponizing. It's what my character would do. But if your character does something and it does elicit a reaction from the party, there's no reason why your character shouldn't stop and explain and change their mind if presented with a better option, or if the party explains how they feel about what your character did. There's nothing wrong with you initiating a conversation or drama by doing what your character would do. But after that happens, your character has to, at some level, accept accountability and explain themselves and be willing to budge. This is collaborative storytelling, and I think a lot of people forget that, or they fall into this idea that they're the main character and every decision that they make is the right one. Part of the magic of being these characters is to make mistakes and to build bonds by understanding that sometimes they make mistakes and talking it through and trying to fix it. There's no point in having an elaborate backstory and acting on your elaborate backstory and not sharing your elaborate backstory. Okay, so like if there's a shopkeep that, killed your character's family or whatever, and you see the shopkeep and you shoot them in the head, that is understandable because I know what your backstory is and you know what your backstory is. But if the rest of the party doesn't know what your backstory is, they just see you shoot somebody in the head and you don't explain it, then you have done a disservice to the game, your character, yourself, and everybody you're playing with. And there's no point in doing that. There's nothing to be gained by it. if you have a backstory, the reason you have a backstory is so that it can be presented at some point. You can have the most elaborate, epic novel of a backstory, but if your character is so cold and stoic that they're never going to share it, then who cares? Who cares? And the other thing is, you have to, like, your character can react to things, but you also have to be cognizant and respectful of the fact that you are playing a game and that things do need to move forward. And if you grind the game to a halt because it's what my character would do, then that again is weaponizing. It's what my character would do, when again that phrase should be a bridge. So that's my in-depth explanation as to what I mean with that. I hope that makes sense, because this is also a very common issue and it shouldn't be. Alright, be considerate of the people you're playing with. Jesus Christ, it shouldn't be that hard. That tip actually leads us to our final tip for today, which is to understand where the camera is. Okay? This is a phrase that I use in all of my games, in all of my GMing. It's actually one of the rules that I make my players really sit down and understand before we begin our venture. Because a lot of problems in TTRPG and collaborative storytelling happen when people don't understand where the camera is. So let me explain what I mean by that. Let's go back to the merchant who did something to a character in the backstory, and that character has a moment where they recognize them, and it's just them in the room alone. The merchant, who's like the secret bad guy of character A's backstory, right? So character A and the merchant, they're in a room alone. Nobody else is in there. The camera is on character A and the merchant, right? And they're having this really intense discourse. And it's just like, why did you kill my family?
I did it because I'm a bad guy.
Well, you're a bad guy, you hurt my heart, and now I'm about to kill you. Like, we've got that whole thing going, right? Very easy to understand that this is the key drama. This is where the camera's focused. This is where we are, right? Cool. Awesome. So, if it's established that character A and the merchant are in this room and that's where the camera is, everybody else should shut the fuck up until the GM says otherwise. And you will not believe how many times where character A is having a conversation with the merchant, nobody else is in the room. Yeah, I recognize you. You're the bad guy. You killed my family.
I did it because I'm a bad guy.
And then character D, who said they were 2,000 miles away, right? Will come in and be like, how do we even know it's the bad guy? And it's like, the camera isn't on you, sweetie. This is character A's moment. This is that player's moment. As a GM, I've constructed this scene so that this player, so I can reward this player for investing in their backstory. So I can reward this player for all the times where it has been character B, C, D, E, F, G's moment, and they quietly sat back and honored that. Everybody gets a turn. So don't ruin this for them. This is collaborative storytelling. It's their turn, right? Now, that's the most blatant. That is the most blatant violation of this tip that I could think of, where it's just that scene, they're in the room, we've established who's in the room, we've established that nobody else is there, and then somebody else who's 2,000 miles away comments. Like, that is the most blatant violation. That is, the light is on red, it's been on red for 3 Mississippis, and you just go. But there are lighter violations of it. If a character is playing a secret, we've all wanted to do this at some point. We've all tried to do it at some point. How many D&D backgrounds are there alone where it's just like you get to create a false identity? Like, if a player is playing a secret, if you want to be somebody that discovers that secret, you should talk with the player first. Don't ruin something that they're setting up just because. Again, this comes back to I believe that a lot of TTRPG players could gain a lot from learning about the meta of wrestling. And there is a rule in wrestling where you wrestle to put somebody else over, right? So if I'm playing somebody that has a secret, let me do that. That's part of my shtick. And should the time come where I want that secret to be uncovered, that should be my choice, and I should have the right to choose who uncovers that. That is a conversation between me and the GM, and everybody else can kind of mind the business. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen people play a secret and somebody goes, well, my passive is this number, so I should know what's going on. Or I see them walking off into the forest to do something that is none of my business, so I'm going to make it my business by chasing them. Like, that's disrespecting where the camera is. That's disrespecting another player's autonomy. That's disrespecting somebody else's story. We're telling this story together, and if you want to do something that is directly interfering with the story that I'm trying to tell, then that means we need to talk about it. You don't just get to decide something that major for me. And if it's something that happens on the fly, we need to either be talking about it in the DMs, we need to either be texting each other or passing notes, something. But you do not have the right to do that, because that is diluting somebody else's fun. And if you're only doing that for your own benefit or so you can feel smart, then go fuck yourself, because that is not what collaborative storytelling is all about. That is you wanting to be the main character. And unless you are playing a one-on-one game where there's just you and a GM, I'm sorry, boo. There's no main characters in a group TTRPG setting. There's not. And that's not a foreign concept. There's not a main character in the Avengers. There's not a main character in Young Justice. There's not a main character in Teen Titans. An ensemble, the ensemble is the main character, equally, evenly, justly. And if you think that your character is any more important than everybody else you play with, then you need to start over again, because you're not getting it. And it's really easy to slip into that. It's really easy to fall into that. We're passionate about the characters we make. We are passionate about the ideas we have. But you have to understand that there are other people at the table, and you need to slow down enough to be empathetic and to make sure that you're not railroading somebody, because you would not like it if somebody railroaded against you. I know it. I know the types. So please, please, please be mindful of that, especially if the people that you're doing that against are listening to the other tips in this video. If they're being vulnerable and honest and expressing themselves openly, and you do this shit, you could truly be hurting somebody. And that is why I tell them to leave. Because you're not worth the hurt that you'll do to them because you thought your fun was more important than another person. So, those are my player tips. Got a little bit deeper than I wanted to, got a little bit more serious than I thought I was going to, but there's magic at the table. And it doesn't take much to get to it. It just takes dropping the ego, playing with empathy, and being creative and vulnerable. And there are some people that will take advantage of that. So we need to watch out for ourselves, and we need to watch out for each other. Golden rule: don't be a dick. And in return, you get magic moments that you'll remember for the rest of your life. I think that's a fair trade. But that's been my player tips. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you enjoy all the videos that will be coming out. I said that I was going to be doing my safety tools video next, but I did this one. I had a really powerful conversation with a group of players that I truly love playing with, and that's what inspired this, because we talked about what makes the table that we play at magical, and we've also talked about what has made us leave tables. And I think that's a conversation that every play group should have. I think every play group should talk about the good experiences they've had at tables and the bad ones. And I think you need to talk about it in depth so you understand where people have come from. And if there's a new player at the table, I think it's great for them to hear it so that they know what to look out for. Because a lot of people have tried this hobby once and sat at a table where somebody thought they were the main character, and they walked away and never played again. And that to me is tragic. So let's make this hobby safer. Let's make this more accessible. Let's make this more open and empathetic. Do all the things that YouTubers tell you to at the end of videos. Click like, subscribe, tell your friends about this if you like it, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.